Something big just happened in the Solomon Islands, and thanks to people like you, the Solomon Islands managed to score a major victory against the Chinese Communist Party. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and I've got something amazing to tell you, which I know is a strange start to a video on this channel since covering China rarely lends itself to optimism, but here we are. The Chinese Communist Party is facing a major setback in the Solomon Islands. And you helped. That's right. Never let anyone tell you you can't change the world. Last week, the Solomon Islands held its first parliamentary election for 50 seats since current Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare came into office in 2019. It was supposed to have happened last year, but Sogavare postponed it, citing the Pacific Games happening around the same time. Who postpones elections for sporting events? I guess as an American that doesn't make sense to me, since in the US, politics is a sporting event. Except there are only two teams and the mascots aren't nearly as cool. This election is huge because it could impact China's influence in the South Pacific. In the election, longtime friend of the show and foe of the CCP, Daniel Suidani, has been re-elected to the Provincial Assembly of Malaita Province, after the CCP managed to get him ousted as premier of the province last year. Oh yeah, we're back, baby. And it's not just him. Other pro-Taiwan politicians have been re-elected, including Matthew Wall and Peter Keneliora Jr. The good news doesn't end there, which honestly makes me a little nervous that I'm stuck in some amazing corner of the Matrix and I'm about to wake up covered in goo. The Solomon Islands pro-China Prime Minister I mentioned earlier, Manasseh Sogavare, failed to secure an outright majority. As of this recording, Sogavare's Our Party has won 13 seats, well short of a majority in the Solomon Islands' 50-seat parliament. Based on the look on his face, they went from the Our Party to the Sour Party. His main rival, the opposition CARE coalition, also have 13 seats, and other seats have gone to independents and smaller parties, including 7 seats for the United Party, which said it would side with CARE against Chinese involvement in the country. All of this is a huge loss for the CCP. Over the years, China has been on a quest to expand influence in the Pacific Island nations. China's trying to lay the foundation for a permanent military presence in the region and control international trade, much like Imperial Japan did during World War II. And the Solomon Islands had been one of their biggest successes. In 2019, China convinced the country to be one of the first in the region to abandon Taiwan recognition. China also got the Solomon Islands to sign a secret security pact in 2022, and a policing pact in 2023 that upgraded ties even further. The bromance between Xi and Sogavare runs deep. But one man in the Solomon Islands stood in China's way, Daniel Suidani. I'll tell you how after the break. Welcome back. Longtime friend of the show, Daniel Suidani, has won re-election to the Malaita Province Assembly in the Solomon Islands, and it is a huge blow to the CCP. Between 2019 and 2023, Suidani was the premier of Malaita, the Solomon Islands' largest province. For years, he stood against cooperation with the CCP and refused Chinese-backed investment in his province, knowing full well that the CCP would undermine his nation in the long run. Because some leaders do get it. Man, optimism is like an adult onesie. Feels strange, but I think I like it. Plus, looks good on me. Suidani is a man of integrity who refuses to be bought off by Chinese bribes. And because of this, he has become a symbol of resistance against Chinese foreign influence. China hates him for this, so it did all it could to undermine him. This culminated in a vote of no confidence against Suidani last year. Ironically, he was accused of illegally soliciting Chinese money and other corruption charges. The person who brought the no confidence vote into motion was an ally of Prime Minister Sogavare, and he ended up replacing Suidani as the new premier of Malaita Province. Despite this, Suidani didn't stop fighting. And here's where you come in. China Uncensored played a small role in helping Suidani continue the good fight. Not only have we given Suidani a platform to raise awareness to the wider internet, but we, through your contributions, raised funds last year to get Suidani to come in person to Washington, D.C., to expose China's efforts in the Solomon Islands to Congress, and enjoy D.C.'s never-ending sporting event. And thanks to the attention we and other like-minded allies put on Suidani, the CCP and Sogavari had to think twice before doing anything sus to him when he returned home. And that brings us to the recent election. Despite being ousted by a vote of no confidence, Suidani was still eligible to run for a seat in parliament. And you bet he didn't stay quiet about China's influence. Suidani's campaign terrified China. That's why in the lead up to the election, Chinese state-run media, like my favorite, the Global Times, tried to downplay concerns about China's influence, dismissing criticism as biased. Because anything that makes China look bad is biased, making China's biggest biased critic reality. There's also been a lot of disinformation, such as the idea that the US would push for a regime change in the Solomon Islands. That way, if Sogavari loses ground in the election, China can blame the US, especially if there's any violence. Meanwhile, pro-China politicians and the Chinese embassy in the country pumped a lot of time, money, and energy into trying to convince the people of the Solomon Islands that they should love China. They showed off infrastructure projects, established a memorandum of understanding between Malaita and the Chinese province Jiangsu, and gave Malaita lots of gifts, including computers, printers, water tanks, solar lights, fishing nets, brush knives, and trash cans. Totally not bribery for election votes, right? Also, I can't think of a worse bribe than getting a bunch of gifts that were made in China. That's just trash that hasn't been thrown out yet. But despite all that, the elections did not go the way the CCP intended. The pro-China Sogavari lackey who ousted and replaced Suidani lost his re-election bid. That means he's no longer eligible to continue working as premier of Malaita. Booyah! And you know the rest. Suidani himself won the most votes in his constituency. Now, Sogavari himself managed to get a win as well. He gets to retain his seat. Figures he'd remain seated since he refuses to stand up against China. But it would really be a dream come true if the Solomon Islands ended up forming a government that's on board with fighting back against China. But this fight isn't over. There's major concern among Solomon Islanders that the world will stop paying close attention to them now that the election is over. There's always the risk that something big could happen, like, say, evidence of so-called election tampering, or Sogavari and his party retaining control of parliament. There's been quite a lot of police training with China recently in case something goes wrong. We can't let China get its way in the Solomon Islands, and the world can't turn a blind eye. Exposing the CCP and supporting people like Suidani is what China Uncensored is all about. Things like funding Suidani's trip to DC, with your help, is why Chinese state-run media has called China Uncensored disgraceful anti-China garbage. Together, we really are making a difference. But I still need your help. It isn't cheap to make the show. I have a whole staff behind me, and I don't make enough from dwindling YouTube ad revenue to keep the show afloat. That's why I need your support on the crowdfunding website patreon.com/China Uncensored. All it takes is $1 or more an episode. I make about 16 episodes a month, but if that's too much for you, you can set a monthly limit. So you can ensure I can keep uncensoring China for even $1 a month. And as a thank you to everyone who gives on Patreon, I'll answer one of your questions at the end of these episodes. Today's question comes from Old Jarhead. The CCP will continue on this course until somebody takes action to bring a halt to this dangerous trend. I wonder who will do something to bring this to a sudden halt. That's a great question, Old Jarhead, and I think what just happened in the Solomon Islands gives us a clue. Sometimes it's easy to feel like the Chinese Communist Party, with its massive military and industrialized manufacturing, is too powerful to beat. But as we just saw, beating the CCP isn't impossible. And it certainly doesn't require military action. It requires individuals standing up and saying no. Individuals like Suidani, but also individuals like you who helped fund his trip to DC. It's also individuals in China standing up and protesting the Chinese regime. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Thanks for your question and your support, Old Jarhead. And in my ongoing attempts to talk about things YouTube considers too controversial by hiding them in gaming content, click on this video about the game The Withering Rooms. It has absolutely nothing to do with Epstein's Island, not a thing. Don't know why I'm bringing it up. Let me know what you think. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.